Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're turning our analytical lens onto the construction materials sector. It's an absolutely massive global industry, providing the essential building blocks of our modern world, things like cement, aggregates, and crushed stone. But as you know, extracting these foundational materials comes with some pretty profound environmental responsibilities. We're going to look at exactly how companies in this sector are expected to report on their biodiversity impacts using standardized accounting metrics. Okay, let's dive into this.
Right out of the gate, we've got to acknowledge the physical reality of this industry. Construction materials entities often operate their own massive quarries right near their processing facilities. And getting to that stone, sand, or gravel, well, that requires the removal of vegetation and topsoil. It requires the blasting and crushing of underlying deposits. As the standard specifically notes, the process can result in permanent landscape alterations with associated biodiversity impacts. So we aren't just talking about temporary construction noise here, we're talking about literally reshaping the earth.
And this physical reality translates directly into some severe business and operational risks. Because of increasing global awareness around the protection of local ecosystems, the environmental characteristics of the land where quarrying actually takes place can massively increase extraction costs. Companies might face stiff regulatory barriers or even intense reputational backlash when they try to access sites in ecologically sensitive areas. Think about it. If a community pushes back on a new quarry site, or if a new protective status is suddenly granted to an area where reserves are located, operations just grind to a halt. You're looking at major difficulties obtaining permits and massive delays in project completion. So understanding exactly how a company manages these environmental risks is absolutely crucial for understanding its financial stability.
Here's a quick roadmap for today's explainer. The Biodiversity Challenge, defining environmental policies, aligning with global standards, tracking disturbed land area, the path to restoration, and finally, why these metrics matter.
All right, Section 1, the Biodiversity Challenge, understanding the framework.
To bring some much-needed consistency to how companies report these risks, we look to the SASB standards, which are now maintained by the International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB, under the IFRS Foundation. These standards are specifically designed to help entities transparently disclose information about sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect their cash flows, access to finance, or cost of capital.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is those two specific rows highlighted right there under the biodiversity impacts topic. The first one is EMCM 160A.1, which focuses on a qualitative discussion and analysis of environmental management policies for active sites. The second, EMCM 160A.2, demands hard quantitative data on the terrestrial land area disturbed and restored. Let's unpack both of these, starting with the policies.
Section 2, defining environmental policies. Unpacking metric EM-CM-160A.1. You see, environmental management isn't just something you scramble to put together when the dump trucks start rolling in. According to the standard, entities need to outline their environmental management plans across the entire sequential project lifecycle. This applies right from the pre-bid phase, when an entity is merely considering acquiring a site, through exploration and appraisal, into actual site development and active production, and all the way through to closure, decommissioning, and eventual restoration. It is a very comprehensive cradle-to-grave expectation.
Within all of those life cycle stages, the policies have to tackle a specific set of operational elements. We're looking at how they manage ecological and biodiversity impacts, of course, but also waste generation, noise pollution, emissions to the air, water discharges, natural resource consumption, and the use of hazardous chemicals. And here's a crucial detail. If these management policies differ significantly depending on the mineral being extracted, say the policies for a silica mine compared to a gypsum quarry, the entity actually has to explicitly disclose those differences for each resource.
Section 3, aligning with global standards, the IFC performance standards.
A key part of this metric is how companies handle operations in areas with protected conservation status or areas defined as critical habitat. The standard points directly to the International Finance Corporation, or IFC, Performance Standard 6 to define this. Critical habitats are areas with high biodiversity value. This includes habitats of significant importance to critically endangered or endemic species, areas supporting globally significant concentrations of migratory species, or rare and highly threatened ecosystems. If a company is operating in these incredibly sensitive zones, they must describe the specific policies and practices applied there. In fact, the metric requires reporting entities to explicitly disclose the exact degree to which their policies and practices align with 4 key IFC performance standards from 2012. They have to map their local site policies against Standard 1 for environmental and social risks, Standard 3 for resource efficiency and pollution prevention, Standard 4 for community health and safety, and, as we just discussed, Standard 6 for biodiversity conservation. This guarantees that a company's internal playbook is being measured against a globally respected yardstick.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 4, Tracking Disturbed Land Area, Unpacking Metric EM-CM 16A.2.
So, pivoting from the qualitative to the quantitative, this brings up a pretty vital question. How do we accurately measure the physical footprint of an active quarry across a massive global portfolio? Thankfully, the SASB standard gives us a very precise methodology for calculating this.
Entities are required to disclose the total area of disturbed land, and it has to be measured in hectares. To put that into perspective, some of these global portfolios cover land masses equivalent to small countries. The absolute crucial point here is the scope of this measurement. This has to be a cumulative total of all currently active sites and sites currently being restored. It is not limited to just the newly disturbed land from the current reporting period. It encompasses land in the exploration, development, production, closure, and post-closure project phases. Basically, if the company has impacted the land and hasn't yet fully repaired it, it stays right there on the ledger.
Section 5. The Path to Restoration. Assisting Ecosystem Recovery.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sharp contrast the standard sets up between disturbed and restored land. A piece of land is considered disturbed throughout its entire operational life, and even during those initial closure phases. But when does it actually drop off that cumulative ledger? Well, land is no longer considered disturbed once post-closure restoration and remediation efforts are substantially complete. The standard uses the Society for Ecological Restoration's baseline definition for this. Restoration is the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. Entities actually have to disclose their specific definition of restoration and the accompanying practices they follow to achieve it. And here is the final piece of the quantitative puzzle. The entity must disclose the specific percentage of that total impacted area, again measured in hectares, that was successfully restored during the reporting period. This percentage acts as an incredibly powerful performance indicator, showing investors exactly how fast a company is moving to close the loop on its environmental impacts.
Section 6. Why these metrics matter. The business case for transparency.
Because at the end of the day, it all comes back to the bottom line. Entities that have an effective environmental management plan for every single stage of the project lifecycle, especially that critical restoration phase during site decommissioning, are directly minimizing their compliance costs. They're lowering their legal liabilities. By transparently aligning with those IFC standards and demonstrating successful land restoration, they face significantly less community resistance when trying to open new quarry sites. Ultimately, this transparency is exactly what secures future extraction permits and prevents devastating project delays. Effective biodiversity management isn't just good ecology, it translates directly into a smoother, more profitable, and far more resilient operation. So, I'm going to leave you with this to chew on as we wrap up today's explainer. When you look at a construction materials company's biodiversity disclosures, ask yourself, is their site management actually securing tomorrow's resources by proving they are responsible stewards of the land, or are their operational footprints just stacking up today's liabilities? It's a question that could very well define the future success of the entire sector. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep learning.